Imagine it's 2 days before Christmas. The air in South Lebanon, Ohio, is biting, and the world is quiet. You've traveled 3 hours to visit family for the holidays. You're asleep in a guest room, dreaming of the holiday meal and the warmth of a family gathering. But at 6 a.m., the silent night is decimated. Not by a caroler, but by the rhythmic, heavy thud of a battering ram and the blinding strobes of police cruisers reflecting off the snow. In the next few minutes, a man known for his brief time in the reality TV spotlight will be led out in his pajamas, facing accusations that will turn a festive home into a crime scene of unimaginable depravity. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about the masks people wear in the suburbs and the moment those masks finally slip. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The neighborhood of Garden View Circle is the picture of Midwestern stability. It's the kind of place where people know their neighbors' car schedules and where holiday decorations are a point of pride. But on December 23, 2025, the stability of this suburb north of Cincinnati was replaced by a massive tactical operation. It wasn't just a few patrol cars. It was a coordinated strike involving detectives, Warren County Sheriff's deputies, and a full SWAT team. When a SWAT team is called for a search warrant, it signifies one of two things. Either the suspect is considered armed and dangerous, or the nature of the evidence is so sensitive that the scene must be secured instantly to prevent the destruction of data. As the tactical units moved toward the front door, the neighbors, some waking up for early shifts, watched through their blinds. They saw the command bus roll in. They saw the crime scene unit, CSU van. This was a forensic excavation of a private life, happening in real time. The target of this massive show of force was a man named Tony McAllister. To some, the name might have rung a faint bell from a decade ago. In 2015, McAllister sought a specific kind of fame. He was a featured cast member on the A&E reality series Neighbors with Benefits. The show was a controversial, fly-on-the-wall look into the subculture of suburban swingers in Ohio. It focused on couples who looked like your average PTA parents by day but lived alternative lifestyles behind closed doors by night. The show was a flash in the pan, canceled after just 2 episodes due to low ratings and local backlash. For most of the cast, the cameras went away and they faded back into private life. But for Tony, the quest for the taboo didn't stop when the production crews packed up. In the years following his brief brush with reality TV stardom, Tony's interests allegedly drifted from the consensual world of swinging into a much darker, much more illegal territory. The search warrant served that morning wasn't about his lifestyle choices. It was about what he was allegedly doing when the world wasn't watching. As the front door was breached, the house was a hive of activity. Inside, the home was decorated for Christmas. There were visiting relatives sleeping in the basement and bedrooms. The deputies entered a space that was supposed to be a sanctuary of holiday cheer. Tony McAllister was taken into custody almost immediately. The bodycam footage begins with the jarring image of Tony being led out of the house. He isn't wearing the polished look of a TV personality. He is in his pajamas, barefoot or in slippers, looking disoriented in the glare of the flashlights. One of the first things you notice in the audio is the immediate shift in Tony's demeanor. He doesn't act like a man who is confused about why the police are there. Instead, his body seems to shut down under the weight of the moment. "What's going on, buddy?" a deputy asks as Tony is placed toward the back of a cruiser. Tony's response is the first hint of the psychological drama that would define the next hour. "I think I'm just mostly having a panic attack," he says. He describes a sensation that many people in handcuffs suddenly experience. "My whole left arm is numb." He talks about his face feeling strange. He mentions that he recently stopped taking a medication and was reading that morning about rebound blood pressure. It is a surreal moment. A man accused of horrific crimes against children and animals providing a self-diagnosis of his own medical anxiety while a SWAT team clears his kitchen. While Tony is being secured, the deputies have to manage a complicated human situation inside the home. Erica Grove, Tony's girlfriend and a registered nurse, is also being detained. But more heartbreaking are the elderly people who were just guests in the house. Erica's parents had driven 3.5 hours from Hudson, Ohio, to spend the holidays with their daughter and Tony. They are seen on bodycam in a state of pure shock. They aren't being arrested, but they are being cleared from the house, so the investigators can do their work. The deputies, to their credit, try to maintain a level of humanity. They talk about the weather, they talk about the long drive back to Hudson, but the underlying tension is unbearable. The grandparents are worried about their dog, Beiju. Beiju is a small, toy breed dog, the kind of animal that lives for laps and quiet rooms. In the middle of a SWAT raid, Beiju is a runoff risk. The deputies coordinate to keep the front door shut specifically to protect this one small, innocent animal. The little dog's name is Beiju, one deputy notes, ensuring that the tactical team doesn't accidentally let the pet slip out into the freezing December morning. As the perimeter is established, the specific nature of the raid begins to leak through the radio chatter and the discussions between officers. This wasn't a drug bust. This was an investigation into pandering obscene material involving children. The deputies discussed the Google account that served as the digital smoking gun. In the world of modern crime, you don't need a physical warehouse of evidence. You just need a server. But there was a second, equally disturbing layer to the warrant. As the officers moved through the house, they weren't just looking for hard drives. They were looking for animals. In the garage, they found 2 large dogs kept in kennels. The deputies refer to these as the target dogs. The misdemeanor charge Tony and Erica were facing, sexual conduct with an animal, wasn't a hypothetical based on a tip. It was an allegation tied to the very animals currently whining in the garage as the command bus pulled into the driveway. The deputies on the scene are heard discussing the logistics of the animals. They mention 2 cats that are loose in the house and the big dogs in the garage. There is a sense of somber duty in their voices. Even for officers who see the worst of humanity, the combination of child exploitation and animal abuse is a heavy burden to process before the sun has even come up. As Tony sits in the back of the cruiser, his complaints of a medical crisis grow louder, his breath hitching as he claims he doesn't want to die in a police car. But while he pleads for a medic to check his blood pressure, the investigators inside the house are moving past the holiday decorations and into the private rooms, where they are about to find the professional tools of a nurse, Erica Grove, sitting right next to the evidence of a secret life that no medical oath could ever justify. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. While Tony McAllister was occupying the attention of the deputies at the curb with his numbness and his rebound blood pressure concerns, the focus of the investigation turned toward the woman who owned the home, Erica Grove. In the hierarchy of the morning's chaos, Erica was a figure of profound contradiction. As the tactical teams moved through the hallways, they weren't just encountering a suspect, they were encountering a professional. Erica Grove was a registered nurse, a woman whose entire adult life had been dedicated to the science of preservation and the ethics of care. The bodycam footage captures a surreal transition. The high adrenaline breach phase of the raid has ended, replaced by the slow, methodical processing phase. Erica is seen being detained, her hands secured behind her back with flex cuffs, the thick, black plastic zip ties used by SWAT teams when they have multiple occupants to manage at once. She is sitting in the back of a patrol car, but the conversation occurring between her and the deputy isn't one of accusations and denials. Instead, it is a chillingly normal conversation about medical science. The deputy, perhaps trying to keep the atmosphere calm to prevent a secondary panic attack like Tony's, begins to fill the time with small talk. He asks Erica about her profession. "I'm a nurse," she confirms. Her voice is steady, a sharp contrast to Tony's frantic breathing in the neighboring cruiser. The deputy, curious about the medical world, asks her about anesthesia. "So, that means you put people under, right?" Erica responds with the clinical precision of someone who has spent years in an operating room. They discuss the nothingness of being under anesthesia, how patients lose all memory of the time they were out. The deputy shares a personal anecdote about his wife's spinal surgery, and Erica listens like a consultant. They even discuss the pediatric response to waking up from sedation, how young males between the ages of 16 and 24 often wake up crazy or combative because of the way their brains process the drugs. This is the medical mask in full effect. To an outsider watching the footage without context, it looks like a friendly chat between colleagues. But the context is everything. This woman, who understands the biology of the brain and the vulnerability of a patient under sedation, is currently being detained because of evidence found on a Google account. Evidence that allegedly depicts the most horrific violations of trust. The deputy eventually decides to show her a gesture of mercy. He realizes she isn't a flight risk and decides to take the cuffs off to make her more comfortable while they wait for the detectives. However, a logistical hurdle arises. The flex cuffs are too strong for the deputy's pocket knife. He has to call for trauma shears, the heavy-duty scissors used by first responders to cut through clothing and leather. There is a dark irony in the fact that they need medical-grade tools to free a nurse from her restraints so she can sit more comfortably while her life as a medical professional effectively ends. While the small talk continues at the cruisers, the command bus and the crime scene unit, CSU, have turned the interior of the home into a forensic laboratory. This wasn't a search for physical contraband like drugs or weapons. It was a search for data. In the digital age, a crime scene can be contained within a device the size of a deck of cards. The investigators are looking for pandering obscene material, a legal term that covers the creation, possession, and distribution of child exploitation material. The deputies discuss the Google account that triggered the investigation. In modern law enforcement, many of these cases begin with a cyber tip from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. When a user uploads a file to a service like Google Drive that matches a known hash, a digital fingerprint of illegal material, the service provider is legally obligated to report it. This report provides the probable cause needed for a judge to sign a search warrant. The investigators weren't just guessing that Tony was involved. They were following a digital trail that led directly to the router in this house. But as the search progressed, the animal element of the case became the physical priority. The deputies discussed the target dogs located in the garage. These aren't the small, fluffy companions found in the living room. These are two large dogs kept in kennels. The way the officers speak about them is telling. They aren't just moving pets for safety. They are documenting them as evidence. One deputy mentions that someone will need to take photos of the dogs, not for a family album, but for a forensic record. They are looking for physical signs of the sexual conduct mentioned in the warrant. The most heart-wrenching aspect is the presence of the innocents. Erica's parents, the grandparents from Hudson, are caught in a nightmare they didn't create. They are elderly, confused, and standing in a driveway at 6 a.m. while a tactical team ransacks their daughter's home. The deputies try to assist them, but the scene is inherently undignified. The grandparents are seen searching for basic necessities: socks, shoes, robes. They are worried about the cold, but they are more worried about Beiju, their 5-year-old dog. The deputies show a surprising amount of tenderness toward this small animal. "Hi, sweet baby," one officer says to Beiju. They coordinate to ensure the front door remains closed so the small dog doesn't bolt into the neighborhood. They find the dog's leash. They find the grandparents' shoes. The grandfather, trying to maintain some semblance of order, talks about the long drive home. He mentions they are 3.5 hours away. He talks about how they aren't dressed to go anywhere, even for breakfast. A deputy jokes that they'd fit right in at Waffle House. A bit of gallows humor intended to break the tension. But as the grandparents prepare to leave, carrying Beiju and a few hastily packed bags, the weight of the situation is visible on their faces. They aren't just leaving a crime scene. They are leaving behind the daughter they thought they knew. As the grandparents pull away, the animal control unit arrives to take custody of the target dogs in the garage. These are described as bull herder crosses, strong, muscular dogs. The deputies had arrived prepared for a fight, bringing shields, bite gloves, and poles. But when the garage door opens, the reality is much sadder. The dogs are docile. They are hungry. They are good boys who seem relieved to see people. "Oh, babies," an officer says, her voice softening as she looks at the two males. The dogs are led into the transport truck. For them, this is the end of their time in the Grove McCollister household. They are being taken for exams, forensic medical checkups that will look for internal and external injuries consistent with sexual abuse. These dogs cannot speak, but their bodies will provide the evidence the prosecution needs for the misdemeanor charges. The deputies reflect on the standard 6 a.m. wake-up call. They explain to the onlookers that they are aggressive in their approach to ensure everyone's safety. A lot of times when we do these, this is where officers get hurt, a deputy explains. They want to catch the suspects while they are still in their jammies, before they can reach for a weapon or a delete button. The house is now empty of its innocent guests. The target dogs are in a cage on their way to a forensic vet. The digital evidence is being bagged and tagged. But back at the cruiser, the medical mask of the morning is about to shatter. Tony McAllister's panic attack has intensified to the point where he is no longer just complaining. He is demanding to be taken to the hospital, and he's about to make a statement that will force the investigators to wonder if his numbness is a symptom of guilt or a calculated attempt to avoid the interrogation room. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As the morning sun climbed over South Lebanon, the investigation into Tony McAllister and Erica Grove fractured into two separate theaters. While the crime scene unit remained at the house on Garden View Circle, Tony McAllister had successfully shifted the focus of his detention from a police cruiser to a medical gurney. For the investigators, this was a frustrating but mandatory detour. In any high-stakes criminal case, the health and viability of a suspect are paramount. If a suspect dies or suffers a medical emergency while in custody, the entire case, regardless of the evidence, can be dismantled by a defense attorney on the grounds of negligence or civil rights violations. The bodycam footage captures the arrival of the EMTs, and the scene is one of clinical monotony. Tony McAllister, the man who once lived for the gaze of reality TV cameras, was now the center of a different kind of attention. He repeatedly complained that his face didn't feel right, and that the numbness in his left arm was radiating. "I don't want to die in a police car just because I'm trying to tough it out," he told the officers. It was a calculated statement, one that forced the hand of the deputies. The EMTs performed their assessment with a practiced, neutral skepticism. They checked his blood pressure, which was elevated, though not at a level consistent with an imminent stroke, and checked his vitals. To the medical professionals on the scene, this looked like a classic stress response. When the human brain is confronted with the total collapse of its social and legal standing, the body often reacts with a massive surge of cortisol and adrenaline. This can cause the very symptoms Tony was describing: tingling, numbness, and a racing heart. However, Tony refused to sign a medical refusal form. He insisted on a hospital transport. For Tony, the hospital represented a temporary sanctuary. It was a place where he was a patient rather than a predator. In a hospital room, the lighting is soft, the staff is there to help, and the harsh reality of a jail cell is kept at bay. But the deputies were one step ahead. They didn't view this as an escape. They viewed it as a delay. "I'll take him, and then I'll just bring him right back up here for his interview," one deputy noted. The plan was clear: provide the medical clearance, then immediately return to the interrogation. While Tony was being transported, the legal gravity of his situation was being codified in the search warrant returns. To understand the severity of this case, one must understand the specific legal definition of pandering obscene material involving a minor under Ohio Revised Code. In the eyes of the law, pandering is far more than just possession. It is a second-degree felony that involves the creation, distribution, or publication of material. In this case, the publication element was tied to Tony's Google account. When a user uploads prohibited material to a cloud server, they are technically distributing that material to the server's infrastructure. In 2025, the digital net for this kind of material is tighter than ever. Tech giants like Google utilize automated hash matching technology. Every known illegal image has a digital fingerprint, a hash. As files are uploaded, the system scans them. If a match is found, it triggers an automatic report to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. This meant that Tony McAllister wasn't just caught because of a neighbor's tip. He was caught by a digital dragnet that he himself had fed. For the investigators, the felony charge was the anchor of the case. While the animal conduct was a disturbing misdemeanor, The pandering charge carried the potential for decades of prison time. It suggested that Tony wasn't just a consumer of this material, but an active participant in the cycle of exploitation. A man who used modern technology to store the dark relics of his private impulses. At the hospital, the atmosphere was a bizarre mix of police procedure and medical care. Tony sat in his hospital bed, still wearing his pajamas, while a deputy stood guard at the door. Every time a nurse entered to check his vitals, they were reminded that the man in the bed was under arrest for crimes that most people find unthinkable. This interrogation gap is a critical moment in true crime narratives. It is the period where the suspect has time to think, to build a story, and to realize the magnitude of their situation. Tony continued to lean into his history of panic attacks. "I'm prone to them," he admitted to the medics. "I'm sure that's probably what it is." This admission was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it made his medical complaints seem less like a stroke and more like a psychological breakdown. On the other hand, it provided the prosecution with evidence of his state of mind. He knew exactly what he was facing, and his body was reeling from the shock of the exposure. While Tony was being cleared by doctors, the target dogs were undergoing their own medical evaluation. The misdemeanor charge of sexual conduct with an animal requires a high burden of physical proof. Forensic veterinarians were tasked with examining the 2 dogs removed from the garage. This process is grueling and clinical. They look for bruising, internal trauma, and DNA evidence that would link the suspects to the animals. The deputies mentioned that they brought shields, bite gloves, and poles, expecting the dogs to be aggressive. When the dogs turned out to be docile, it added a layer of tragedy to the case. In animal behavior science, docility in the face of abuse often suggests learned helplessness, a state where the animal has been subjected to enough trauma that it no longer tries to fight back or escape. These dogs, the good boys mentioned by the deputies, were now the primary physical witnesses in a case where the human witnesses were refusing to speak. Back at the station, Erica Grove was also beginning the formal process of her detention. As a nurse, she would have known that the medical emergency Tony was claiming was likely a fabrication or an anxiety attack. Yet, she remained silent. Her professional life, built on the foundation of the Hippocratic Oath, was now in direct conflict with her personal life. The investigation was now expanding. Detectives were looking for more than just the files Tony had uploaded. They were looking for evidence of joint venture. Did Erica know about the Google account? Did she participate in the creation of the material? In Ohio, being a lesser offender, as the deputies initially described her, still carries life-altering consequences if you are found to have facilitated or permitted a crime in your own home. The nurse persona was no longer a shield. It was a liability. Tony McCollister was eventually given a clean bill of health. There was no stroke, no heart attack, and no medical reason to keep him in the hospital. The safe space of the medical wing was about to be replaced by the concrete reality of the Warren County Jail. But as the deputies prepared to transport him from the hospital bed to the booking desk, a final piece of evidence was discovered back at the house. A piece of evidence that would prove the panic attack wasn't just about the police raid, but about a specific, incriminating video that Tony thought he had successfully deleted. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The safe haven of the hospital room eventually had to come to an end. For Tony McCollister, the transition from a medical gurney back into the steel and concrete world of law enforcement was the final death knell of his freedom. Once the doctors at the hospital confirmed what the deputies already suspected, that his panic attack and numbness were physical manifestations of psychological guilt rather than a medical emergency, the patient's status was revoked. He was no longer a man needing care. He was a defendant needing a cell. The booking process at the Warren County Jail is designed to be a leveling experience. For a man who had once been a featured personality on a national cable network, the intake process was a stripping away of the Tony McCollister persona. He was no longer a neighbor with benefits or a reality TV star. He was a number in a database. The bodycam footage from the jail intake captures the stark, fluorescent reality of this moment. Tony is seen standing at the booking desk, his pajamas now replaced by the standard-issue orange jumpsuit that signifies the loss of autonomy. The charges read out to him were a grim summary of the morning's discoveries. 2 counts: felony pandering obscene material involving children and misdemeanor sexual conduct with animals. In Ohio, a felony of the 2nd degree carries a mandatory prison sentence if convicted, often ranging from 2 to 8 years per count. For Tony, the weight of the Google account discovery was now a permanent part of his legal record. The fingerprints were taken, the DNA swabs were processed, and the mugshot was captured, a photo that would quickly replace his professional headshots in the public eye. While Tony was being processed, Erica Grove was facing her own reckoning. Though initially considered the lesser of the 2 offenders by the deputies on the scene, the legal reality for Erica was becoming increasingly severe. As a registered nurse, her arrest for sexual conduct with an animal sent shockwaves through the local medical community. In the state of Ohio, the Board of Nursing maintains strict moral turpitude clauses. An arrest for a crime of this nature, regardless of the misdemeanor status, triggers an immediate investigation into a professional's fitness to practice. Erica's decision to enter a not guilty plea at her initial hearing was a calculated legal move. In the American justice system, a not guilty plea is often the first step in a long process of discovery, allowing her defense team to examine the evidence the CSU had gathered from the house. They would look at the bodycam footage, the forensic vet reports on the dogs, and the digital logs. However, the court of public opinion was not as patient as the court of law. The image of a nurse, someone sworn to protect the vulnerable, being involved in the exploitation of animals created a narrative of betrayal that was impossible to walk back. The impact of the December 23rd raid on the quiet suburb of South Lebanon cannot be overstated. Garden View Circle was a neighborhood built on the assumption of privacy and suburban peace. The revelation that such depravity was allegedly occurring behind the walls of a well-maintained home shattered the illusion of safety that many residents cherished. The community was left to grapple with the fact that they had lived next to these individuals for years. The reality TV element added a layer of morbid curiosity to the case. Neighbors who had seen Tony on Neighbors with Benefits were forced to reevaluate their interactions with him. The show had portrayed a world of consensual, adult swinging, a lifestyle that many found scandalous but legal. The shift from that consensual subculture into the non-consensual exploitation of children and animals suggested an escalation that is often studied in forensic psychology. It suggested that for some, the boundary pushing of a swinger lifestyle can become a gateway into darker, more predatory impulses where the concept of consent is entirely discarded. While the humans fought their legal battles, the 2 target dogs from the garage were beginning a long road to recovery. Removed from the environment of the Grove McCollister home, they were no longer evidence, they were survivors. Forensic veterinarians documented the physical state of the animals, providing the prosecution with the silent testimony needed for the misdemeanor charges. These dogs, which the deputies had described as sweet and docile, were placed in the care of animal welfare advocates who could provide the stability and safety they had been denied. The grandparents from Hudson, Ohio, also faced a long recovery. They had arrived for a Christmas celebration and left as witnesses to a nightmare. Their small dog, Beju, remained a symbol of the innocence that had been caught in the crossfire of the raid. The drive back to Hudson must have been filled with a suffocating silence as they processed the fact that their daughter and her partner were not the people they appeared to be. As the case moves toward a grand jury, the focus remains on the digital evidence. In modern true crime, the cloud is the ultimate witness. Every upload, every timestamp, and every login serves as a breadcrumb that leads back to the intent of the user. The prosecution in Warren County has the task of connecting the digital files on the Google account to the physical acts alleged in the home. Tony McCollister remains under the microscope, his panic attack at the scene now a distant memory compared to the reality of his upcoming trial. If a grand jury decides to indict him on the felony charges, he faces a future where the only neighbors he has are fellow inmates. Erica Grove, too, awaits her day in court, her life as a nurse effectively over, her reputation forever linked to a dark December morning. In the end, the case of Tony McCollister and Erica Grove is a haunting reminder that the most disturbing crimes often happen in the most mundane places. It is a story of how a quest for fame and taboo can spiral into a darkness that destroys everything it touches: careers, families, and the lives of the innocent. On December 23, 2025, the silent night in South Lebanon was broken, and the truth that emerged was something no holiday could ever fix. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, clarity, and respect for the people affected. If you want to see more fact-based true crime stories like this one, make sure you subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.